So I'm going to invite Sarah Gallagher. She is the council person for District 4, and she's going to talk about some of the real evaluation concerns, the process. Just as a reminder, we all got them in December. The actual challenges to Tyler were due on the 20th of February this year. And if you didn't apply for it by then, you cannot challenge through that site. But that doesn't mean that you have no other luck. You essentially, there are other appeal processes. They're much more frustrating in my opinion, and they're bigger lifts, but it is possible if you do believe something was inaccurate in your evaluation. Now, if you just don't like it, but you don't really think anything's inaccurate in what you're seeing, I wouldn't expect it to change drastically, but I will share personally, when I did challenge it with Tyler, there were things that they told me like I had a finished basement, which I didn't, and I was able to prove that I didn't, and it did actually affect my total assessment. So, Sarah, I'm going to leave it over to you now.
Oh, great. Thank you, Grace, so much. And thanks for having me here. And hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Gallagher. I represent the fourth. I've been on the council for 2 terms. So been through the budget process. I've not been through a re-eval process before. So I am learning a lot of this alongside with you. And I'm here to share what I know, but I'm really here also to get questions from you all so that we can bring them back to our process. Because we also just received this and are working through many questions and concerns, and where the council is working with a third-party consultant to be able to work through some of this. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, together as we go. I want to make sure, Grace, can you all hear me okay? Okay, my computer gave me a language update. So, I mean, I'll just quickly, you guys all know the re-evaluation process. It's a state statute. We're supposed to do it every 5 years. We did it 1 year early this year because the state statute changed and we had to do it a year earlier. So we'll do it this year, but we'll do it again in 5 years. And the purpose is to really update the grand list, so we make sure we have all the properties on it, and those properties are valued at the rate that they're supposed to be valued in order to do all the calculations that Grace talked about earlier. So it happened it happened all through last year, with it coming out at the end of the year to be implemented with this budget process. So when we talk about it, there's different ways of doing a year reval, and if you look, it's all online on the Hamden website, and you can look through the report actually. And I was looking through it the other day of the way they did it, because you can do a market analysis and income analysis. There's different ways of doing a reval, and then you also can do a reval. You're doing the reval for both residential as well as commercial properties and other properties. So when we got our reval, and I'm looking at the questions too, just hopefully answer them as we go. At first it looked like, great, the grand list went up by 40% or whatever it went up by. And so we should technically have a lower mill rate, which we would. And if we applied this mill rate to our current budget, the mill rate would go down. That, unfortunately, though, would not impact the taxes that we pay, even if we apply the grand list, right? Because you're paying based on the budget. What some of the concerns we have with this reassessment that the council's looking at is, one, this reassessment was done during a period where rental or housing prices really skyrocketed after the pandemic. We all know across the country, housing prices went up. And they went up at a different rate than commercial properties. So if you see with the grand list that came out, there was a differential increase between residential and commercial properties. And there was a shift of burden from commercial to residential properties. And I've seen on some of the analysis folks done about Walmart and some of other properties where there's been increases or decreases. So that's one concern, is this tax burden, and where should it be in commercial versus residential? And then with the economy going forward, will that housing market continue to be at the rate it's at for the next few years, or will that bubble burst? And so that is something to look at, and we need to look at. The other thing that the council is concerned about is sort of, are there disparities within the reval as it was done? Are different neighborhoods impacted differently? Are different types of housing, lower income, lower priced houses versus higher priced houses? Did they get different increases? And was it equitably done throughout impacted throughout the town and through the town by income, by neighborhoods, by other disparities that we want to look at. The other thing is that, just factually, nobody can afford a $3,000 or a $10,000 increase in their taxes. So with a reval, it is unacceptable to expect residents to be able to pay that much more, or even if properties did their market price went up that way, no one could afford that level of tax increase from one year to the next, right? We talk on the rental market a lot about rental caps across and other things. Like no one should, our incomes don't go up that much, so we can't afford to add that much to budgets, to our household budgets. So even with the reval, thinking about how there's options on when the state statute allows us to phase that in over time. So that could be an option to think about how to phase it in. The statute also allows opportunities to phase it in differently for residential versus commercial. So is there opportunities to right size this? So as you see, as I'm talking, I've got a lot of questions, right? I don't have the answers for you, but the way we're approaching that as a council, as I said earlier, is we want to bring on a third party consultant to do some of this modeling for us, to really look at what are the different ways the reval and grand list could be postponed, implemented incrementally, and was it done right in the first place that we should be using it. So we're having someone look at that for us. So that is sort of like the reval concerns. I see in here, there's a question around property tax relief. There is a section on the Hamden website where there's forms that if you are elderly, you can apply for a tax relief. So that is in there. The other thing I want to just sort of, and I think we'll get to this later, is that the reval is just one ingredient in the whole process. So we have the reval and the grand list, but if you look at our budget, that's just one part of it. There's several other drivers that we can talk about that are driving the budget in the direction it's going. One is that folks may know we did a debt restructuring a few years back. And so last year we had a balloon payment in that debt restructure. We're paying $30 million in our debt service. And so that raised it up to that 30 million for the next about 8 years. It's either 2032 or 2034 that we come back down to around $19 million a year. So the next several years we're paying this balloon payment on our debt restructure, which goes into the operating budget and then onto taxpayers. The other piece, couple other pieces in there, is that last year there was placed in the budget $8 million of general fund dollars, fund balance that was used in operating. And that now is not in the budget. And now that is being placed on the taxpayers to make up that $8 million difference. And then the third piece is the red light camera revenue, which was $5 million last year. It's $5 million this year, which is also revenue in the budget that cannot be used for all of the ways that it's being used in the budget. So that's $13 million of a hole in the budget that has to be made up. And that's one of the actual drivers of this increase you're seeing in the tax. It's the reval, but more importantly, these $13 million that was a hole last year. I'll just note that this was predicted last year. The Finance Commission had sent us a memo letting us know this was going to happen. There was lots of conversation about the budget. There were the last year, and many legislative council members didn't vote for that and didn't want to do that, but it did happen. I did not vote for that. I wanted to go with the Finance Commission. So there's just a lot of factors that we need to think about when we think about it. So the reval is one, but it's sort of using fund balance in one-time funds. It's these other components, and then the debt service that we need to think about. I want to know, and I don't know, Grace, if folks can put in the chat, or if you're collecting questions from the chat as we look into potential questions to dive into with the reevaluation. I'd love to gather those from y'all so that we can have them and make sure that the folks we're working with are diving into those, and then we can work with you to get that information back to you. But for me, I'm still diving into this, so I have a lot of questions as well, but I want to get those from you guys so that we can make sure to ask them and get those answers together. I don't know, Grace, is that kind of what you were looking for?
So and like as Sarah mentioned, she's touching on some things that I see questions coming in like, well, what about this? Those things will also be covered by other members, so we're not going to address it
Okay.
in that section. They're going to keep going. And as she mentioned, there are probably going to be some other questions that come out of this that we can do follow-ups on. But like I saw some questions about the red light and things like that. Those are going to be addressed next. So thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it. But in some, we're looking into they're looking into this, and there seems to be a lot of heavy lifting. But I think
Yeah. And
we
I'll
want
just say, I mean, right now we need the modeling. Like we can't, like for me, like we can think about, like you have the app that you've created, which is great, but we need folks to do the modeling to say, if we put the pressure on the commercial, if we switch the burden to commercial, how will that impact residential and different properties? So that analysis needs to happen. And unfortunately, it needs to happen very quickly because we have a very short timeline to work with the budget. And so getting the information and working with the administration to do that is going to be really, really important.
definitely. And I also want to remind everyone too, because I obviously there's a lot of concerns about the budget and other things in general. I want to remind everyone that legislative council like is a very like it's kind of like a stipend position. The people on this council live in this town. Many of them are taxpayers. So the point is like this affects all of us, and so we're all motivated to find a solution.